Alrighty, y'all. Today we're going to be looking at some kind of questions and impressions that Americans and maybe just some other travelers in general got throughout Europe, but from a car or an automotive spin or perspective. Yeah, basically talking about cars and car culture in Europe, kind of for me, learning a little bit more about it and seeing what kind of experiences and oddities people notice from a car guy perspective. And, you know, this would be definitely the biggest theme of my trip anywhere to any country would be, tourist second, car guy traveling and seeing differences and similarities first. So let's go ahead and jump into this. So actually I might do this screen so you guys can get a little bit of a better view. This first post is going to be Americans who's been in Europe. What were your impressions about cars, traffic, driving culture in general? What was weird and what was interesting? Actually, I can do this screen right here. So as a golf owner, it was a bit surreal seeing a golf parked on the side of the road, dwarfing most of the cars around it. It legitimately looked large. Then I got back home to the U.S. and went back to being the smallest car in the lot. That is so accurate because Volkswagen Golfs, GTIs, we even had, I think, the Rabbit here. I can't remember. I think that's long gone now. But yeah, all of these small VW hatchbacks are literally small. That is legitimately the smallest car in the parking lot, no doubt, unless there's like a Mitsubishi Mirage around or like a smart car or something. But remember, these are super rare to have a car that small here. It's really funny hearing that that's a not only normal sized car, but if anything, maybe a slightly above normal sized car in most European countries. That's so weird. Just shows the difference, the massive difference between your average, row of cars in the U.S. versus, insert any European country. Someone even mentions that cars just, look a little bigger in Europe because of the surroundings, right? Like the way the sidewalks or footpaths are and the curbs and the smaller streets, and it's all distorted, right? Compared to gigantor American, suburbia and cities where everything's huge, right? They said that at an airport, they saw a line of Mercedes-Benz vehicles and that they thought they were S-Class limousines, which would be a big car even here in the U.S., until they got closer and saw that they were actually just C-Class models, which, of course, are pretty small, especially compared to an S-Class. And then, of course, parking spots. This would be the big thing for me. It would be quite a shock driving and parking, just because I have heard the parking spots are very small. Like the normal European parking spot would only fit a compact car here in the U.S. We don't even have to go crazy with driving a big crew cab diesel 3/4 ton truck here in the U.S. that a lot of people daily drive, right? Even taking a minivan, like a Dodge Grand Caravan, or in my case, like my Ford Crown Victoria Police Interceptor. It's a big car. And I feel like that would be, a little bit difficult in certain scenarios in Europe. Whereas here, I would never really run into space issues here. But in some European countries, even with a Crown Vic, I'm sure you would. This one I found very interesting. Someone mentions that when they were in Switzerland, there were almost no Hondas anywhere. That was so weird. Someone adds, it's so weird not seeing Toyotas or Hondas in the Balkans, even though it was the type of cars they should like because of reliability. I guess 2000s to 2010s TDIs are their equivalent. People basically saying, ease of maintenance, right? TDIs are reliable enough and have parts everywhere all over Europe, and I can definitely see that, right? Basically, people saying Hondas and Toyotas are respected and known for reliability in Europe, as I imagine they would be, because I'm pretty sure they're worldwide famous for that, right? But basically, the Honda Toyota network, right, like your maintenance and getting parts and servicing is just for some reason not nearly as common and integrated as you would find maybe in some other countries. So obviously here in the U.S., Honda and Toyota and basically all the Japanese car companies that are available here are very popular, and they're relatively easy to maintain and service and find dealers and mechanics. You're not going to find a mechanic that is going to have trouble working on a Toyota Camry here, right? Or a Honda Civic. It's going to be very easy to own that car here, and that's why millions of people do. So yeah, hearing that, when I see literally, I would argue, sometimes it seems like more Toyotas and Hondas in a parking lot than domestic cars here, like Chevys or Dodges or Fords. It's weird hearing that would be kind of a rare sight in a lot of European countries, not seeing Toyotas at like every other car. Trust me, that is really weird. I did not actually realize that. And then the biggest one that I've seen come up before, and this one I would absolutely love about the European driving experience: better lane discipline. People stayed out of left lanes when not passing. Also clear that some cities weren't tailored for cars. Some parking garages I've been to were so tight they had padding on the walls and you had to do like 5-point turns to get into a spot. So yeah, parking in parking garages is definitely not one of my favorite things here, even here in the US. So I imagine that would be a little bit of a mini nightmare the first time doing that in Europe. But I could tell you what, driving on higher speed roads like highways and stuff like that, having that lane discipline be just the norm through, most of your drivers around you, that would feel so good. That would be a relief, because lane discipline is just utterly horrible here in the US, right? It's really bad. And it's frustrating as someone who follows lane discipline and wants to have a good experience and a smooth experience on the highway. It's hard to find here. It gets clunky real quick. All right, now this is a fun question, and I want you guys to answer this in the comments. You got to say where you're from, and if you're from Europe and you would come to the U.S. for this question, I want to hear what you would buy or drive if you had the chance, right? This is all for fun, hypothetical. So this is Americans going to Europe, and what is the first car you buy? Europeans, you're going to America. What is the first car you buy, right? And, just let it run free, any price, right? Just have fun with it. I'm going straight to, even if I had like an infinite budget, I'm gonna blow your mind here. I'm going for, I don't really know right now off the top of my head, but I'm thinking like one of the very sporty, fun hot hatches, right? I want to drive like an old Peugeot or a Renault, something from like maybe the 80s or 90s or even early thousands. Some really clean, fun manual transmission, brand new tires, locked in machine. I think that would be awesome. Because I feel like that's going to be, a little easier to find in basically any European country, and I think that just fits the bill so nicely and would be a great departure from what I'm used to here, and I think would be just a vibe. So good in Europe. I am pleased to read one of the first answers is EU to US. They bought a 2003 Ford Crown Vic. I freaking love that. I mentioned my Crown Victoria in a lot of car videos. It's just something I'm so proud of. I've owned two of them, not at once. I used to have one, then I got rid of it, and then, of course, I'm on my second one that I have now, and it's my pride and joy. I freaking love that car. The Police Interceptor, especially Crown Victorias, for me, they're just amazing, right? They're super bulletproof reliable, easy to maintain, easy to get parts for, if you do need something, and they're just such a damn joy to drive. They look good, they sound good, and there's something about them. They drive great. Anyway, it's funny to hear that a lot of Europeans that have moved here go for the Crown Vic. I freaking love it. You got great taste. A large, cheap rear-wheel drive V8 was just irresistible. I had a 90 Mitsubishi Colt before that in the EU, 1.35 speed. It was a big change. I loved the Crown Vic and had it for a few years. These days, I actually miss smaller Euro cars a little. And that's how it is, man. Being a car guy, you definitely will go through phases, and you could totally enjoy the heck out of that Crown Vic, but after a while, you're going to miss smaller, nimble cars as well. That's why here in the U.S., I guess it's a little easier. You might run into some, crazy little issues, right, where you want to own multiple cars. So, I have the small SUV stick shift 4-cylinder manual transmission, I should say. Totally different experience. And great on fuel and stuff compared to my Crown Victoria. And so I guess in my head, I tell myself that, hey, that's awesome. It's justified because I get, if I want the compact SUV with a manual, I got it. And if I want a big, beautiful machine that's just cruising and so easy to drive and so nice, then I drive the Crown Victoria. But I also realize that's a pretty American perspective on stuff. This one's cool. Someone said they just moved from Norway all the way to the U.S. state of Colorado, and they bought a 1967 Ford F-250. Next up is some sort of classic muscle car, whatever I can find for cheap. Well, classic muscle cars and cheap definitely don't go together, right? I don't know what you would consider cheap, but for still an unbelievable sum of money, you might be able to get a shell of a muscle car with no, drivetrain, and that might be cheap, but it's not going to be cheap putting it together. So good luck on that one. But I like their taste, right? They're jumping all into Americana all the way from Norway with that old truck. I think that's pretty cool. Now, of course, I love this. This would be an American going to Europe. I'd buy a proper wagon, in a state car. You mean a Kombi? Sincerely, a German. Yeah. I could see that too. I said a hot hatch, but I would take one of the beautiful various wagons you guys have, right? I think I'd almost go with a Skoda wagon, right? Do they make a Superb in a wagon? I know like the Skoda Octavia comes in a wagon, right? But I would take a Skoda Superb in a heartbeat too. Let me throw that on the list. I think that would be fun. Now, this next one's hilarious. The Tesla Cybertruck. I'm sure anyone watching this has at least heard of this. This thing's an absolute mess, right? Look, I give one thing. It's wild and it's unique. Well, I guess we could say that, right? I have since, years ago when this was announced, I am not a fan of this vehicle. No hate to anyone that wants one or buys one. I'm just simply saying I do not like the Cybertruck. I have zero desire to own one of these. They're just goofy to me, and I quite frankly am amazed that it's a real thing after all these years. I'm amazed that I literally just saw one on the road a couple days ago near me, and I've seen actually a few in the past few months, and I can't believe it's real. I will say that. I literally can't believe it. It doesn't look like a real vehicle. It is like you're in a fever dream when you see this thing next to you amongst all the real cars around it. But you guys won't see it in Europe. I don't think it's going anywhere in any of the European countries, and I guess the reason is if you summarize some really long article, it just basically is because pedestrian impact related, safety, that kind of thing. Yeah, I honestly don't know how this thing is even legal here in the U.S. So I definitely don't think it would be, I don't think it would fly in Europe. That would be my guess. And I think that's definitely the case. It's not going there. You got to love the comments. I guess that I'm probably not the only one that's glad that this ugly monstrosity isn't coming to Europe. Also, someone geniusly pointed out the unbelievable strangeness and oddities and inconsistencies in U.S. law and loopholes and regulation. We could go on and on for hours about the nightmare that is U.S. regulation, but this is a great example. That monstrosity of a truck is okay to the pedestrians in the U.S., and yet some people won't do pop-up headlights due to legislations. Yeah, pop-up headlights, as a car guy, used to be super cool. They're very iconic. But, those aren't allowed anymore here, right? The Corvette famously had to get rid of them. And it all comes down to cars versus trucks. The loophole is the number one market seller. Yeah, trucks basically get away with murder here in the U.S. Trucks can do whatever they want, but cars have all the rules here. It's really weird and very inconsistent. Someone mentioned finally that there would be probably some issues with like the total gross weight, right? This is a big vehicle and it's also very heavy. So there might be issues with people having a normal license in, whatever European country and then being allowed to drive this might be kind of shaky. Not to mention, I don't even know if they mentioned this, but I feel like Wouldn't like taxes or something be an issue on this as well? I imagine, right? All right, and next up, we're looking at the best-selling cars in 2024 so far. Now, this is literally from 3 weeks ago. So this is like the first half of the year. I can't believe we're already halfway through the year, or more than actually. And this is your list for the best-selling cars in Europe. So we have the Dacia Sandero. Dacia, remember I just learned about them a few months ago? Look at them in first place. I guess cheap, simple, and pretty reliable is a great formula. They are number one from January to June 2024. Then, of course, we have the very, very famous and kind of good old, true, and reliable, VW Golf, right? That's a famous car worldwide. Even here in the U.S., I think it's well respected. But of course, in Europe, this is going to be one of your main nameplates that everyone knows and quite frankly relies on. So yeah, not surprising to see the Golf up there still holding its own in the modern day era at the number 2 spot. And then of course the Renault Clio. I know nothing about that car, but it's in third, so it must be pretty popular. The Volkswagen T-Roc. I've never heard of that in my life. I don't know what it is, but that's fourth. The Peugeot 208, Skoda Octavia, Citroen C3. The Tesla Model Y is at number 8. That's kind of shocking, although it is falling by 26% from last year. The Toyota Yaris Cross coming in at number 9, and of course the 10 spot, just the Yaris. And then if you would like, there are the rest of them. I won't read them one by one. A lot of Volkswagens on there, and a lot of Dacias as well. And there's, of course, your top 5 pictured. There is that T-Roc. That's such a weird name. Yeah, I've never heard of that thing, unless this is like a sister car to maybe one of the smaller VWs you can get here. Like I think we have a small one called the Taos, the Volkswagen Taos, named after Taos, New Mexico, of course, or maybe the Volkswagen Tiguan. I'm not sure. I'm not an expert on their lineup. And for the final one, I really, really would love to get your guys' opinions on this. I find this fascinating that this differs so much across the world. And I tell you what, this differs even within the U.S. as a community, and it sometimes makes my head spin. All right. And it's something that's kind of important. And, you want to do best by your vehicle, right? They're, beautiful machines, and very, you rely on them, especially here in the U.S., right? It's a big investment to have a car. It's a lot of cost and a lot of responsibility having one. So you want to take care of it. And we're talking about oil changes. This one's about oil change intervals, huge differences between the U.S. and Europe. So if we pull this up, just came back from an extended stay in Europe and learned that their oil change intervals are around 30,000 kilometers or 18,000 miles. But in the U.S., it is recommended to be no more than 5,000 miles. Are we getting fleeced in the U.S. by the oil change lobby? Now, this is a great question. The old adage was always 3 months or 3,000 miles here in the U.S., and I've heard growing up that that's very outdated. That was more like 30, 40 years ago. Now, of course, I've had, many cars over the years, and a lot of these U.S. market cars did say in the manual, some of them were like 8,000 mile change intervals. I had a Chrysler 200 sedan with the Pentastar V6 that said that wanted a 10,000 mile interchange, and I thought that was, or interval rather. And I thought that was very bizarre, right? As an American, I've never heard of that. And this was an American car. And I thought that was, like I said, just mind-blowing. I didn't actually end up following it. I only had that car for 2 years, and I ended up, of course, trading it away. During that time, I think it was like 6,000 or 7,000 miles, and it felt weird to go that long without an oil change. I'll tell you, with these older cars, right, a 2006 Crown Victoria and a 2004 Saturn, obviously these are older. They're not new anymore, not anywhere near it. So I tend to watch them carefully, and I want them to run good and run good for a long time. Right? So I am typically following like a 4,500 miles or 5,000 mile interval rather. It seems to be working fine. But hearing that you guys can go, once a year or, 30,000 kilometers, 15 to, let's just say 18,000 miles, that sounds awesome because you don't have to do it that frequently for oil changes. But to me, I can't. That just breaks my brain thinking about that. I feel like what I've been taught here, that just seems crazy. Someone sums it up from the American perspective is manufacturers have been progressively making their intervals longer, which they have, and to get people used to not wasting as much money on oil changes. But the habits I learned from my pops 50 years ago dies hard over many generations. So yeah, I think people are still ingrained to that old-fashioned thinking here, and it's really hard to shake that for some reason. We just hold on to stuff like that. Someone mentions that they followed the German guidelines for their BMW M3. Oil changes every 15,000 miles or once a year. They went 130,000 miles with basic regular maintenance. I'll follow the German guidelines. So, I mean, that's good to hear that they had an M3. That's a great car, high-performance car, in my opinion. And they still, they went 130K miles. That's a lot, right? With very basic maintenance, no major breakdowns at all, right? That gives confidence to that European, or in this case, German style of maintenance where, you're basically doing it once a year. That sounds very attractive to me, right? I would love to not worry about oil changes every 3 months. It's kind of annoying. What I find funny is a lot of them are at that 10,000 mile mark here in the U.S. for like a lot of cars, what they put in the owner's manual. What I find funny is the only exception is our Subaru. We have a 2022, new to us, but it's not new anymore. I guess it's 2 years old now. We have a 22 Subaru, and of course, Subarus have the it's a turbocharged boxer engine. It's our family SUV that, of course, is my wife's, right? And it's a great car. But what's funny is they suggest, this is a modern car, right? Only a couple years old. They suggest every 5,000 to 6,000 miles, and it says that right in the manual. That's pretty kind of often, right, for these newer cars, considering I had a 2013 Chrysler that suggested to every 10,000 miles. So I just thought I'd throw that in there. I do think that's kind of funny, but it's also kind of on brand, right? Because I feel like Subaru boxer engines are awesome and they sound great, but I feel like they're known, maybe even in Europe, I'm sure you guys know this, maybe. Subaru engines are kind of known for, oil consumption, even when they're brand new. So it kind of makes sense. Going 10,000 miles all the time in between oil changes on a Subaru might be, just might turn out to be a really bad day someday. Anyway, I could go on and on about this. Like I said, I turn it to you. I think this is such an interesting topic, and I suppose it can vary on driving style. Are you driving highway all the time and just cruising? Are you doing a lot of hard stop and go traffic? And of course, it depends on the car, the engine, whatever, right? I know there's a lot of variables. Yeah, that's going to be it for this one. This was a lot of fun. I hope you enjoyed yourself as well. I appreciate you watching. Until next time, y'all, my name is Ian. You're watching IWrocker, and until next time, I'll catch you later.